Let's begin. So, yesterday it was preamble, and we have seen several issues within the preamble, such as the core constitutional values mentioned in the preamble, the nature of Indian state, and how these all are important for our civil service exam preparation. Now, today we are starting with another important topic. Uh, if you have ever heard of Article 12 and Article 13, which mentions several things which are very important in the functioning of the Indian Constitution and Indian polity. So, these Article 12 and Article 13 are the part third of the Constitution, which is the part of fundamental rights. We have so many parts in the Constitution. Part 1, Part 2, Part 2 contains citizenship, Part 3 contains the fundamental right. And these two articles are the basis which defines what does state means. The Article 12 provides definition of state, and Article 13 deals with the word law and its several other manifestations. So why it is important to understand these two words? If you look at the fundamental rights, what are these fundamental rights? They are the basic human rights provided in the Constitution in a very legal way, and you can approach court if some of your fundamental rights have been abridged or infringed. Now, when I say your fundamental rights can be abridged or infringed, who can do it? There are only two entities which can do it. Either it can be state or it can be private companies, or it can be individuals. So all these three are in the position to hurt or abridge or infringe your fundamental rights. Since state shall be stopped, because this is the most powerful authority among all, it needs to be stopped from infringing your fundamental rights. And how are they stopped from infringing your fundamental rights? Several limitations has been put, and these limitations help the state to limit its functioning. For example, if you look here, this is the whole idea of constitutionality. Constitutionality means limited government. And when you say this is the limited government which we are talking about, then there has to be several bars, several restrictions on the state and the power of the state. And how this power of the state can be restricted? By approaching court. You can directly go to court against any action taken by the state which is infringing or abridging your fundamental rights. So, to understand that how can we go against the state when they are infringing our fundamental rights, it is very important to understand the concept of state. What does state means and how Constitution defines it under Article 12. Until the word state is defined, it will be very difficult for you to approach court. What authority, if the court will ask you what kind of authority has infringed your fundamental right, whether it was the state or the private companies or the individuals. So it is very important to make a distinction between who is an individual, who is private company, and what is state. So Article 12 defines state and Article 13 defines law. It also says that any law which infringes or abridges the fundamental rights of the citizens will be declared null and void to the extent of the violation. So these two articles has to be read in consonance, has to be read together, that any law if made by the government or any order or any bylaw or any rules or any regulations or any ordinance, anything which is passed by the government, made by the government or by the state, if it is infringing the fundamental right, then it will be declared as null and void. So let us go into the detail of these two and then you will understand it better. So let's start with Article 12 and see what does it contain. Article 12 says that it's the definition of state, and try to concentrate on it. What does a state mean? Parliament. Parliament involves both the houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Then the other element which can be called a state is the State Legislative Assembly. Then the third thing can be local authorities. Third thing can be local authorities, the municipalities and the panchayats including. Municipalities and panchayats. And the fourth instrument is other authorities. So if you read article number 12, it will define these four words as state. Parliament, the state legislature, the local authorities and the other authorities. It also involves executive. Also involves executive. Executive where at the center and at the state level. Center and state level. So now the confusion is only with other authorities. You can very well see if executive takes any decision. For example, who is the executive in India? If you see at the union level, the center level, it is the president who works on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Council of Ministers is formed from the legislature, since we have the parliamentary form of government. पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट है ना अपना, तो जब अपन वोट डालने जाते हैं मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट चुनने के लिए, तो क्या होता है, हम अपने मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट चुनते हैं और जिसकी भी मेजॉरिटी होती है लोकसभा में वो गवर्नमेंट बनाता है, और वो मेजॉरिटी में से एक काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर बनती है जिनको डिफरेंट पोर्टफोलियोज मिलते हैं, और उसमें से भी एक छोटा सा ग्रुप चुना जाता है जिनको कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर बोलते हैं, जिनको बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट मेजर मिनिस्ट्रीज मिलती है, सच एज मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ डिफेंस, इस तरह से। तो वो जो पूरा काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर है, विच इज अराउंड द 10% ऑफ द टोटल the number of the seats in the Lok Sabha, 10% of it can be made as the Council of Ministers. The head of that Council of Ministers is the Prime Minister. तो ये पूरी हमारी एग्जीक्यूटिव है, द प्रेसिडेंट, प्राइम मिनिस्टर, काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर, these are the people who are enforcing the law. And then the state machinery, which also includes IAS officer, IPS officer, even the clerks and other things, everything is included. So they enforce the law. Also, the parliament makes the law. Then the state legislature also makes the law. The council also, along with the legislative assembly, the legislative council also. Legislative assembly and legislative council both are included. Not all the states in India have legislative council, only 6 have, but they are also included in the definition of state. And then comes the local authority, the municipalities and the panchayats which we have all over the country. All these are included in the definition of state. Now, why are they included in the definition of state? They can they infringe the fundamental rights of the citizen? Yes, very well they can. Parliament or state legislature can make a law which can take away your right to freedom of speech. If any law is passed that such a such group of people should not have access to internet or should not have access to newspapers, then again your rights, the fundamental rights, have been infringed. Such a such group of people shall not be representative, shall not be represented in any of the government institution. Again, your right to equality has been infringed. If you have been taken into confinement without any charges on you, again your right to life has been infringed. So it is very important to understand that state is very powerful. It can pass the law and do anything it wants. So there needs to be several restrictions on the state. The fundamental right puts the restrictions on the state, but they are not adequate on its own. We need several other provisions such as Article 12 and Article 13. Article 12 is the definition of state. What is state? Until you understand the definition of state, जब तक हमको यही नहीं पता होगा कि स्टेट क्या है, हम ये कैसे समझेंगे कि कौन सी अथॉरिटी ऐसी है जो हमारा फंडामेंटल राइट को इन्फ्रिंज कर सकती है, हमसे ले सकती है. तो पहले हम समझेंगे व्हाट इज स्टेट, देन फिर हम समझेंगे कि व्हाट इज लॉ. भाई पार्लियामेंट है तो वो लॉ बनाएगी ना, और उसी लॉ के तहत आपका फंडामेंटल राइट अब्रिज या इन्फ्रिंज किया जाएगा. तो फंडामेंटल राइट इन्फ्रिंज करने के लिए पार्लियामेंट को लॉ बनाना तो जरूरी है. तो उसके लिए अपन को लॉ वर्ड को समझना जरूरी है. तो लॉ वर्ड जो है इसको अच्छे से डिफाइन करा है आर्टिकल नंबर 13 में, और स्टेट वर्ड जो है इसको बहुत अच्छे से डिफाइन करा है आर्टिकल नंबर 12 में. तो ये दोनों से आपको हेल्प मिलती है इन अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट देयर इज सेवरल लिमिटेशन ऑन द स्टेट as far as our fundamental right goes, and the justiciability of these fundamental rights, then that means how they can be enforced. There are two more articles which are important. Article number 32, which is also been called as the soul of the constitution by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and then article 226. For example, if your fundamental right has been abridged by any local authority, let's say, then what will you do? What is the remedy available to you? There are fundamental rights. Let's say you have the fundamental right of equality, of freedom, of liberty, of justice, of whatever we have. If it is infringed by any authority, let's say local authority, what will you do? If the local authority is not supplying clean water to your community or clean water to your locality, and people are suffering because of that, old people have gone to hospitals, some have also died because of that, is this the infringement of your fundamental right? Of course it is the infringement of your fundamental right. How? Your right to life has been infringed under Article 21. Right to life does not mean that you just live. It means dignified life, and clean water, which is very essential for our living, is necessary for the dignified life. And if any local authority deliberately is not supplying the clean water or not cleaning the water source, is this the infringement of your fundamental right? Of course. But then what will you do? Okay, you came to know that my fundamental right has been infringed. What is the step? Next step which you will take to regain your position or regain your right, that is the remedy. And the remedy is available under Article 32 and 226. Under these articles, you can approach court. You can directly go to the courts. And what will court do? justice. So the Supreme Court, of course the high courts also, but we talk more about the Supreme Court because of its overarching powers, has been called as the guardian of constitution, has been called as the protector of fundamental rights. Article 13 gives it the power. There are other articles also, but Article 13, when we see in detail, you will come to know, gives the power to the Supreme Court to be the guardian of the Constitution, to be the interpreter of the Constitution, and the protector of fundamental right. That simply means if any law, ordinance, bylaw, rule, regulation, custom is infringing your fundamental right, you can approach the Supreme Court under Article 32. And Supreme Court, as the protector of the fundamental right, as the interpreter of the Constitution of India, as the guardian of the Constitution of India, has all the right to declare that particular law or bylaw or ordinance as null and void. So directions and decisions are taken by Supreme Court when you approach it under Article 32. Directly you can approach it. That's the remedy available to you. So I hope you are understanding. One more concept which we are going to see in the next class will be citizens. So fundamental rights are given to citizens mainly. To Indian citizens, all the fundamental rights mentioned under Part 3 are available. But some of the fundamental rights are also available to aliens. Aliens means non-citizens. So to understand the concept of citizenship is also important for understanding the fundamental right. This we will take up in next class. But for now, Article 12 and Article 13 are important. So when we study the fundamental rights, there are several issues around it we need to understand. Because fundamental rights, they cannot be just given. They have to be given with the remedy. That if they are infringed or abridged or they are taken away by a state, then what are the remedies available to us? What can we do about it? So, Article 12 defines state as executive, the center government and the state government. Executive means the enforcement power, the prime ministers, the presidents, the governors, the chief ministers, the council of ministers, the secretaries of different departments, the collectors, the IAS officers and the IPS officers and the forest officers. Everybody is included in this. Then the second is parliament, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. They can make law. They can also make law in such a way that it infringes your fundamental right. Then the state legislature, they can do the same thing what parliament can do. Then comes the local authority, your municipalities and your panchayats. They can also come up with a decision which can infringe your fundamental rights. Then comes other authorities, and the confusion is always with this other authorities. What are other authorities which can be considered as state? This other authorities has not been defined in the constitution but has been written like this only. In subsequent years after the constitution was drafted, Supreme Court have came up with different interpretation of this word other authorities. In Ajay Hasia case, this was another case in which Supreme Court has given some form or structure, some concrete structure to the term other authorities, in which the Supreme Court calls it as the instrumentalities. Whose instrumentalities? The instrumentalities of the state. So these other authorities are called as the instrumentalities. Instrumentalities. What will these instrumentalities do? They can also abridge, infringe or take away your fundamental right. तो अब देखेंगे क्या ये हैं ये इंस्ट्रूमेंटलिटीज. ये तो हैं, साथ साथ में वो भी हो सकती हैं. So we have seen yesterday when we were studying the preamble that India is a welfare state, isn't it? India is a welfare state. What happens in a welfare state? In a welfare state, the state tries to minimize the inequality prevalent in the society. That inequality can be on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, descent, also economic inequality, where the poorer are very poorer and the rich are very rich. To bring the poorer and raise their standard of living, the state has to work. Now, always the state does not have the capacity to work on its own, especially in countries like India where the population is too huge. वह तो 140 करोड़ की पॉपुलेशन हो रही है, अकेला स्टेट, अकेला कलेक्टर, अकेला एसपी क्या कर लेगा? तो किसी ना किसी की हेल्प तो लेनी पड़ेगी ना। और हेल्प किसकी ली जाती है? जिसके पास हेल्प देने की क्षमता हो। तो स्टेट अपना वेलफेयर कैरेक्टर को मेंटेन करने के लिए कुछ कंपनीज की हेल्प लेता है, कुछ ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस की हेल्प लेता है, कुछ एनजीओस की हेल्प लेता है, कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटीज की हेल्प लेता है, रिलीजियस इंस्टीट्यूशंस की हेल्प लेता है। और ये जो हेल्प होती है, इसमें गवर्नमेंट उनको कई बार फाइनेंस करती है। कई बार ऐसा होता है कि गवर्नमेंट उनके ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में सब्सटेंशियल शेयर होल्डिंग करती है। कई बार ऐसा रहता है कि गवर्नमेंट के पास पावर होता है उनके टॉप मैनेजमेंट को अपॉइंट करने का और रिमूव करने का। तो ये कुछ चीजें हैं जहां पर गवर्नमेंट जब सब्सटेंशियल रोल प्ले करती है उन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस या अदर अथॉरिटीज की फंक्शनिंग में, तो उन अथॉरिटीज को, उन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को, उन इंस्टीट्यूशंस को भी अपन स्टेट की कैटेगरी में रखते हैं। सो इन अजय हासिया केस, सुप्रीम कोर्ट हैज केम अप विद अ ग्रेट इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ दिस वर्ड अदर अथॉरिटीज एंड कॉल्ड इट एज द इंस्ट्रूमेंटलिटीज ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट। मतलब इंस्ट्रूमेंट या फिर टूल थ्रू विच द गवर्नमेंट वर्क्स, एंड मेजरली द वर्क ऑफ गवर्नमेंट इज द वेलफेयर, to maintain its character of the welfare state, the welfare works. So for example, if we have this one NGO, let's say, which helps the election commission in preparation of the electoral rolls, just an example, if an NGO helps the election commission to prepare the electoral roll, now this is a major functioning of the government. It is of major importance to conduct free and fair election by the election commission and to give adult suffrage. Adult suffrage means all the people who are citizen of India and above 18 year of age are eligible to vote. To maintain this whole system of parliamentary democracy, we need people to come out and vote. It is their duty. But the making of the adult suffrage in itself is a huge responsibility, and the election commission alone cannot do it. When election commission does not have its own capacity of doing it, so election commission goes on and take helps from several institutions, organizations in the preparation of government adult suffrage. कई बार तो जो संविदा शिक्षक होते हैं या फिर लोअर अथॉरिटीज होती हैं गवर्नमेंट की, इलेक्टोरल रोल उनसे ही प्रिपेयर करवा दिया जाता है। सो लेट्स से एनजीओ कम्स अप एंड दिस एनजीओ हेल्प्स द इलेक्शन कमीशन इन प्रिपरेशन ऑफ द इलेक्टोरल रोल। व्हाट विल हैपन? द गवर्नमेंट इज गोइंग टू फंड इट. Sometimes government will also have the say in its top management, who can be appointed, who can be removed. Third thing, if that NGO does substantial work for the government, which it is doing, the substantial work has been done. What is the substantial work here? Preparation of the electoral roll. So when they do the substantial work for the government, they are financed by the government, and the government holds major say in its functioning, such as the removal and appointment of the top management of such an institution. That institution or organization or company will be called as the instrumentality of the government. So the condition which needs to be fulfilled, and it is not as if all the conditions have to be fulfilled. Even if one condition is fulfilled, then it will be called as the instrumentality of the government. For example, it is financed by the government, it is doing substantial work for the government. If it is doing substantial work for the government. And third thing, when the government holds superior power or overarching power to remove or appoint the top management of such an institution, that then it will be called as the instrumentality of the government. And those instrumentalities are included in other authorities. Every institution needs to follow these. So education institutions, let's say unaided education institution, if there are private institutions, education institution, maybe colleges or maybe schools, if they are unaided, that means if they are not being paid or not being financed by the government, then can it be included in the definition of instrumentalities? No, it cannot be. So for an organization or an institution to be the part of the instrumentality or to be called as a state, three important criteria needs to be fulfilled. It has to be financed by the government, it must do substantial work for the government, or the government holds the overarching power. This is important to understand. It's important to understand about the other authorities. Now there is also an exception given. And what is that exception? The cooperative societies. And the bylaws made by it. Cooperative societies and the bylaws made by it will not be considered under the definition of law in article number 13. This also we are going to see in article 13, and how it is going to relate with article number 12, that also we are going to see. So I hope you understand article 12 nicely. It gives the definition of state. It defines the state. A state is an authority which can abridge or take away your fundamental right if it is not kept in check. If reasonable restrictions are not imposed on the state, state is such a powerful authority that it takes away or abridges your fundamental right. And to avoid such a thing, the balance is provided in the constitution. And what is that balance? Few important articles such as article 12, 13, 32, 26 and the whole part 3rd. It is the restriction on the arbitrary power of state. Freedom is nothing but the absence of state control. This is important to understand. And how can you ensure the less and less arbitrariness of the state or the absence of control of the state? It can only be ensured when you have some remedy in your hand, that if something like this happens, what you are going to do? You can approach the court under article 32 and 226. These things we will study in writ petitions separately, but you need to understand article 12 first. So if any question comes in your prelims examination, which of these authorities can be considered as state, I think you are in a position to answer. Which of them are state? You are in the position to answer. Now, important thing, let's come to article 13. We should add it. Article 13. Article 13 has 4 clauses, different clauses which say different things. As I told you, it defines law in different ways, shapes and forms. Let's delve directly into it. What does the clause number 1 of Article 13 says? I could not see any comment being made by people. I hope if you are watching and if you have any question, you can directly ask me a question, and you can also ask if any other doubt is there related to your prelims paper and your mains examination preparation also. So I have a instrument here, and I can see no messages being delivered, but people are watching. So please, if you have any query, if you have any doubt relating to this thing, please ask me. So let's see Article 13. So these are the 4 clauses. I have written it in a very simplified form for you to understand. Under Article 13, there are 4 clauses. Initially, these 4 clauses were not there. There were only 3 clauses, and the 4th one was added by the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act in 1971. So Article 13 says, Clause 1 says that any law which are inconsistent with the fundamental rights provided under Part 3 of the Constitution. Any law which are inconsistent with the fundamental rights, okay, abridges the fundamental rights or infringes the fundamental rights must be declared null and void to the extent of the inconsistency. For example, there is a law which has 5 provisions, and this 5th provision is infringing the fundamental right or is inconsistent with the fundamental right, then only this provision will be removed, not the whole law. So till the inconsistency is there, the moment the inconsistency with the fundamental right is removed, the law which has been passed remains as it is. It is very important to understand here the concept of doctrine of severability. Doctrine of severability. What does it say? Doctrine of severability says that if a law is made and if that law is inconsistent with any of the fundamental right, then that particular part which is inconsistent must be removed. So from a whole law, from this whole lot of so many provisions, only the provision which is inconsistent with the fundamental right, let's say this one must be removed. Not the whole law must be removed, because it is a legislative process. It takes time and energy for the parliament to pass any law. And if they have passed some law, they should be mindful that it should not infringe the fundamental right. But if Supreme Court says, if Supreme Court interprets it in such a way, since Supreme Court, as we have seen, is the interpreter, protector of the Constitution, protector of the fundamental right, it has the power to interpret this law. And if Supreme Court finds that any part of it is infringing the fundamental right or is inconsistent with the fundamental right, that particular part can be removed. This is called the doctrine of severability. So we try to sever or separate the part which is inconsistent with the fundamental right. So like this, this was the law, and these portions were the provisions which were infringing the fundamental rights. They have been removed, and once they have been removed, what is left? The original box. The original box. This is not inconsistent with the fundamental right. So this is the left part. But again, doctrine of severability does not stop here. It goes on to say that if the part which is removed takes away the soul of the legislation, that means the purpose of the legislation is totally defeated. The purpose of the legislation was to do something, okay, to build something, and in order to remove the portion which was inconsistent with the fundamental right, you have removed the whole purpose of the legislation. That simply means the purpose of the legislation itself was inconsistent with the fundamental right. Then the whole law, the whole legislation will be considered as null and void. So either remove those parts which are inconsistent with the fundamental rights, or once these parts are removed which were inconsistent, if the soul is missing, if the purpose of the legislation is totally missing, then the whole law has to be scrapped. That means nothing can come in way of fundamental rights. This is the guarantee of the Constitution. This is the guarantee for the citizens of India to develop to the optimum level they can, and for that the basic human rights in a very legal, codified, organized manner has been provided in the fundamental rights. So the doctrine of severability is important. Now, why have I written pre-constitution and post-constitution? When the Constitution came into force on 26th of January 1950, before that also several laws were prevalent in the country. So, clause 1 of Article 13 says that any law from the pre-constitutional era, that means before the enforcement of the Constitution, before 26th of January 1950, any law, if it infringes or abridges or is inconsistent with the fundamental rights, it will be termed as null and void to the extent of its inconsistency. So the doctrine of severability applies to both the pre-constitutional legislations and the post-constitutional legislations. The pre-constitutional laws and the post-constitutional laws. It applies to both. What is post-constitutional laws? Which have been made by the Constitution now in the real time or after the commencement of the Constitution. These are also called as law in force. If you see Article 13, Clause 3, Subclause B, it defines law in force, which includes law passed or made by a legislature or other competent authority in the territory of India before the commencement of this Constitution and not previously repealed. One more doctrine comes into play here. Law in force. Okay. What is that? Doctrine of eclipse. What is doctrine of eclipse? You must know eclipse. ग्रहण आपको पता है ना क्या होता है? चंद्र ग्रहण, सूर्य ग्रहण. जब चंद्रमा सूरज और धरती के बीच में आ जाता है तो जो सूरज से लाइट आ रही होती है धरती की तरफ, वो उतने पोर्शन पर नहीं आती है जितने पोर्शन पे चंद्रमा चमक रहा होता है। आई होप यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस। लेट्स ड्रॉ अ डायग्राम। दिस इज सन और ये अपनी रेज ऐसे भेज रहा है सब जगह। दिस इज अर्थ, दिस इज अर्थ। अर्थ के अराउंड रिवॉल्व कर रहा है कौन? मून। और मून सामने आ जाता है यहां पर। तो इतने पोर्शन में सूरज की किरणें नहीं जाती हैं, ये तो जा रही हैं, ये भी जा रही हैं, बट ये जो पोर्शन होता है ना, इधर ग्रहण लग जाता है, इधर लाइट नहीं जाती है। ये बेसिक ज्योग्राफी का कॉन्सेप्ट है। आई होप ये तो आपने एनसीईआरटीज में या शुरू में अपने स्कूल में पढ़ा होगा, है बहुत बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट है। तो डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एक्लिप्स है, ये ऐसा ही है। अभी ये सन को, मून को, इन सबको आप रिप्लेस कर दीजिए अलग अलग चीजों से, ठीक है। मान लीजिए ये जो सन है ये प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लॉ है, कोई लॉ था पहले का प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल। वो जो अर्थ है वो अभी प्रेजेंट की क्या है, कंडीशन है उस लॉ की। और ये जो मून है जो बीच में आ गया है, ये क्या है, उतना पोर्शन जो फंडामेंटल राइट को इन्फ्रिंज कर रहा है, ठीक है। तो डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एक्लिप्स क्या बोलता है कि उतना पोर्शन जो फंडामेंटल राइट को इन्फ्रिंज कर रहा है इसको हटा दो। अब मान लो ये मून और बड़ा है, ये उतना, ये इतना बड़ा है, तो फिर जितना पार्ट फंडामेंटल राइट को इन्फ्रिंज कर रहा है उसको हटा दो। पता चला ये तो बहुत बड़ा है, तो पूरा लेजिस्लेशन को ही हटा दो। ये डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ सेवरेबिलिटी भी है और डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एक्लिप्स भी है, एक साथ दोनों का कुछ कुछ पार्ट्स मिलता है, बट दोनों में डिफरेंस क्या है। व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एक्लिप्स, ये जो भी लॉ है ना, ये एक्लिप्स्ड फॉर्म में, मतलब डॉर्मेंट फॉर्म में रहते हैं, डॉर्मेंट फॉर्म में रहते हैं। दैट मीन्स any law which was prevalent before the making of the constitution and were in force, pre-constitutional era laws which were in force during that time, then the constitution came up and was enforced on 26th of January 1950. After that, any of those laws which were inconsistent with the fundamental right will not be scrapped, will not be termed as null and void, but they will remain dormant until and unless the parliament amends them. आप एक बात सोचो, प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल बहुत सारे लॉज हैं, अगर पार्लियामेंट पूरे पूरे लॉ को उठा के अमेंड करने लगे, या फिर पूरे के पूरे लॉज को अपन उठाकर अलग कर दें, फेंक दें, इन सब में टाइम और एनर्जी लगती है। तो एक बहुत शानदार डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एक्लिप्स है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लॉ में, इसको इजाद किया गया और इसको बताया गया कि देखिए होता क्या है कि कोई भी प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एरा के जो लॉज हैं जो हमारे देश में अभी चल रहे हैं 1950 के बाद, कमेंसमेंट और एनफोर्समेंट ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बाद जो भी लॉज चल रहे हैं, और अगर उसमें या तो वो पूरे के पूरे या तो कुछ पार्ट ऑफ इट अगर इनकंसिस्टेंट हैं भी, तो वो उनको वैसा का वैसे ही पड़ा रहने दो, उनको डॉर्मेंट पड़ा रहने दो। एक एक लॉ को उठा के नल एंड वॉइड प्रूफ करके अपना टाइम बर्बाद करने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है। लेट देम बी डॉर्मेंट। दैट मीन्स फंडामेंटल राइट जो है ना, वह फंडामेंटल राइट जो है उसके पीछे कुछ भी चीज अगर आ रही है जो उसको इन्फ्रिंज करने की कोशिश कर रही है, तो उसको वैसे के वैसे ही पीछे पड़े रहने दो, उसको हटाओ मत, उसको डॉर्मेंट स्थिति में रहने दो। तो कोई भी ऐसा प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लॉ है जो आपका फ्रीडम ऑफ एसोसिएशन को या फ्रीडम ऑफ फॉर्मिंग असेंबलीज एंड एसोसिएशन को अगर इन्फ्रिंज कर रहा है, प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एरा वाला मतलब बिफोर द कमेंसमेंट ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वाला मतलब बिफोर 26 ऑफ जनवरी 1950 वाला कोई भी ऐसा लॉ है तो उसको नल एंड वॉइड प्रूफ करने की जगह उसको वैसा का वैसा रहने दीजिए। दैट मीन्स उसकी जो पूरी पावर है वो आपने खत्म कर दी और उसकी जगह पे जो फंडामेंटल राइट है वो प्रिवेलेंट रहेगा। दिस पोजीशन विल बी देयर अंटिल एंड अनलेस पार्लियामेंट अमेंड्स दैट लॉ। अब पार्लियामेंट ने उस लेजिस्लेशन को उठाया और अमेंड कर दिया तो बात अलग है, नहीं तो वो लेजिस्लेशन डोरमेंट स्थिति में रहेगा। दिस इज व्हाट इज डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ एक्लिप्स। तो clause 1 of article 13 talks about the pre-constitutional era laws and how they are seen in the present real-time situation. Similarly, in the post-constitutional era, if any law made by any state legislature or the parliament, any law made by state legislature or the parliament, if it infringes the fundamental right, it will be null and void to the extent of इनकंसिस्टेंसी। अगर वो कोई भी लॉ अगर आज पार्लियामेंट बनाती है और वो इनकंसिस्टेंट है या फिर वो कोई ना कोई फंडामेंटल राइट से अलाइंड नहीं है, दिस इज कॉल्ड एज इनकंसिस्टेंसी। इनकंसिस्टेंसी वही है ना कि फंडामेंटल राइट टू लाइफ कुछ बात बोलती है, राइट टू फ्रीडम कुछ बात बोलता है, राइट टू इक्वालिटी कुछ चीज कहती है और आपने जो लॉ बनाया है वो उसके अपोजिट बोल रहा है, तो दिस इज कॉल्ड एज इनकंसिस्टेंसी। तो उस लॉ का जो भी पार्ट जितने भी एक्सटेंट तक इनकंसिस्टेंट है उसको नल एंड वॉइड प्रूफ कर दिया जाएगा। और अगर पूरा लेजिस्लेशन ही वही बात बोल रहा है तो पूरे लेजिस्लेशन को नल एंड वॉइड घोषित कर दिया जाएगा। नल एब इनिशियो करके एक वर्ड है, एब इनिशियो का मतलब फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग ऑफ द लेजिस्लेशन, वही उसी को नल एंड वॉइड घोषित कर दिया जाएगा। द मोमेंट इट इज पास्ड बाय पार्लियामेंट एंड समबडी गोज टू द सुप्रीम कोर्ट, files a petition, Supreme Court interprets that it is infringing on the fundamental right of the citizen, what it is going to do? It is going to scrap the whole law. So it is important to understand no law can be inconsistent with the fundamental rights provided to the citizens of the country. कुछ जगहों पर ऐसा होता है कि कुछ लॉ होते हैं जो कि इनकंसिस्टेंट घोषित कर दिए जाते हैं कोर्ट द्वारा, तो सिटीजन्स पे तो वो नल एंड वॉइड हैं एब इनिशियो फ्रॉम द स्टार्टिंग, बट दे कंटिन्यू टू वर्क फॉर द नॉन सिटीजन्स एंड द कंपनीज। देयर आर सेवरल कैटेगरी ऑफ सच लॉज। So this was an exception, but it's a very little exemption. The important thing for us to understand is any law concerning the citizens of the country, if it is infringing the fundamental right of the citizens, if it is inconsistent with any fundamental right or any clause of the fundamental right or any part or even little word of the fundamental right, it shall be null and void to the extent of इनकंसिस्टेंसी। आप ये बात याद रखना, मतलब कोई भी चीज ऐसी नहीं है जो आपके फंडामेंटल राइट को आपसे ले सकती है। इसके पीछे अच्छी खासी कोर्ट केसेस की लड़ाई हुई थी। जब अपन यहां पर आएंगे क्लॉज नंबर 4 में तो अपन को पता चलेगा कैसे शंकरी प्रसाद केस, गोलकनाथ केस, 24th कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट, केशवानंद भारती केस, इन सब चीजों में इन्वॉल्व है कि व्हाट इज द डेफिनेशन ऑफ लॉ हियर। सो फर्स्ट लेट्स कम टू क्लॉज नंबर 3, law. It defines law. It says law includes bylaw, bylaws. It includes ordinances. Ordinances are those instruments, those law which are passed by the executive. Governor और president द्वारा ये पास कर दिया जाता है when the assembly is not in session, when the parliament is not in session. But such a law has to be made or approved by the parliament within 6 months. So ordinances are also considered as law. Bylaws are also considered as law. Customs prevalent in the Indian society are also considered as law. Then rules regulations, provisions made by state, remember made by state will be considered as law. तो अब अपन ने जो पहले बात की थी, देयर आर टू कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी के जो बाय लॉज होते हैं, कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी के जो बाय लॉज होते हैं दे आर नॉट कंसिडर्ड एज लॉ. दूसरा, जो रिलीजियस इंस्टीट्यूशंस होते हैं या फिर जो रिलीजियस लॉ होते हैं, पर्सनल लॉ होते हैं, जैसे अपन बोलते हैं हिंदू लॉ, मुस्लिम लॉ, इनके अंडर भी जो भी प्रोविजंस या रूल्स या रेगुलेशंस बनते हैं उनको भी लॉ की डेफिनेशन में नहीं जोड़ा गया है. कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी के बाय लॉज और पर्सनल लॉज को. पर्सनल लॉज को क्यों नहीं जोड़ा गया है? क्योंकि भाई हमारे पास राइट टू फ्रीडम ऑफ वर्शिप एंड राइट टू फ्रीडम ऑफ रिलीजन भी तो है. आर्टिकल 25 है, आर्टिकल 26 है. तो उन अलग अलग जो आर्टिकल्स हैं, जो फ्रीडम्स दी गई हैं रिलीजन की, वो अपने अकॉर्डिंग भी तो कुछ लॉ बनाएंगे. बट रीजनेबल रिस्ट्रिक्शन के अंदर अगर आप क्लॉज नंबर 2 देखें आर्टिकल 25 का, तो रीजनेबल रिस्ट्रिक्शन वहां पर भी लागू होती है. आप अपने रूल्स और रेगुलेशंस बनाने के लिए फ्री हैं. इंडिया इज अ सेक्युलर स्टेट, प्रोटेक्शन इज गिवन टू ऑल द रिलीजन्स इक्वली एंड यू हैव द फ्रीडम टू प्रोफेस, प्रोपोगेट and practice your religion, to make laws, and those laws will also not be considered under the definition of law under article 13. But that doesn't mean कि आप कोई ऐसा law बना रहे हैं which is inconsistent with human dignity. And one of such law was ट्रिपल तलाक, जिसको पार्लियामेंट ने लाकर और null and void घोषित कर दिया है. It was against the dignity of Muslim women. It was against the फंडामेंटल राइट ऑफ मुस्लिम वुमेन. तो रीजनेबल रिस्ट्रिक्शंस यहां बहुत जरूरी है. तो एक्सेप्शंस कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी के बाय लॉज हैं और पर्सनल लॉज हैं. इसके अलावा स्टेट द्वारा, स्टेट का मतलब क्या है, फिर से अगर ये वाली स्लाइड पे देखें, स्टेट का मतलब क्या है बाय एग्जीक्यूटिव. आप देखो ना, गवर्नमेंट कुछ कुछ ऑर्डर्स इशू कर देती है, कुछ ना कुछ प्रोविजंस लेकर आ जाती है, रूल्स बना देती है, रेगुलेशंस बना देती है. गवर्नमेंट करती है ना, गवर्नमेंट ऑफिस के वाटर डिपार्टमेंट से या फिर सिविल डिफेंस डिपार्टमेंट से कुछ रेगुलेशंस आए हैं. अगर ऐसा कोई काम गवर्नमेंट कर देती है, मतलब एग्जीक्यूटिव करती है, तो वो तो स्टेट की डेफिनेशन में आ रहा है ना, तो वो भी लॉ कहलाएगा. और इन सबको लॉ क्यों बोल रहे हैं? व्हाई आर वी कॉलिंग देम लॉ? ये लॉ का क्या लफड़ा है? लॉ का ये लफड़ा है कि अपन बोल रहे हैं भाई प्री कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एरा में जो भी लॉ इज इन्फ्रिंजिंग द फंडामेंटल राइट और आर इनकंसिस्टेंट विद द फंडामेंटल राइट विल बी डिक्लेयर्ड नल एंड वॉइड. इसमें भी अपन लॉ की बात कर रहे हैं, लॉ विल बी नल एंड वॉइड. इसमें भी अपन लॉ की बात कर रहे हैं, कह रहे हैं कि भाई पोस्ट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एरा में जो भी रियल टाइम में अभी यहां इस वक्त पार्लियामेंट लॉज बना रही है, वो भी क्या है, अगर that is inconsistent with the fundamental rights, then those will also be declared as null and void. तो यहां पर भी हमने लॉ की बात की. तो अब थर्ड वाला जो क्लॉज है, इसने लॉ को डिफाइन कर दिया. इसने कहा भैया लॉ का मतलब सिर्फ इतना नहीं है कि पार्लियामेंट ने कोई लॉ बना दी या स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर ने कोई लॉ बना दिया. टर्म बहुत वाइड है. इन चीजों की डेफिनेशन जितनी वाइड होगी उतना ज्यादा फंडामेंटल राइट का लाभ लोगों को मिलेगा. अगर सिर्फ लॉ की डेफिनेशन ये होती कि द पार्लियामेंट इफ इट इज पासिंग एनी लॉ इज द लॉ, देन क्या होता, एग्जीक्यूटिव द्वारा ऑर्डर्स, रेगुलेशंस, रूल्स वो सब पास किए गए हैं, उनको लॉ कंसीडर किया नहीं जाता और उसमें आप फंडामेंटल राइट अब्रिज कर दो लोगों का. टू स्टॉप द स्टेट फ्रॉम डूइंग एनीथिंग लाइक दिस, सबसे पहले तो स्टेट को डिफाइन करा कि स्टेट का मतलब यही नहीं है कि प्रधानमंत्री, स्टेट का मतलब लेजिस्लेचर्स भी हैं, स्टेट का मतलब पार्लियामेंट भी है, स्टेट का मतलब सेंटर और स्टेट की गवर्नमेंट्स भी हैं। स्टेट का मतलब म्युनिसिपैलिटीज और पंचायत भी हैं, और स्टेट का मतलब इंस्ट्रूमेंटलिटीज भी हैं। सबसे पहले तो ये जानने की जरूरत है कि ये सारा जो इतना बड़ा ब्रॉड डेफिनेशन दिया गया है स्टेट का, इनमें से किसी के पास भी पावर नहीं है कि वो आपके फंडामेंटल राइट को अब्रिज करें। दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड। दैट इज व्हाई द स्टेट हैज बीन डिफाइंड एंड इट्स डेफिनेशन इज वेरी ऑर्गेनिक, इट कीप्स इंक्रीजिंग। तो जितनी ब्रॉड डेफिनेशन होगी उतने ब्रॉड आपके फंडामेंटल राइट्स होंगे। अगर सिर्फ बोल दिया जाए कि लॉ पास्ड बाय पार्लियामेंट इज लॉ, या बोल दिया जाए कि गवर्नमेंट का मतलब होता है सिर्फ पार्लियामेंट, तो इसका मतलब तो बाकी जो भी अथॉरिटीज हैं, लोकल अथॉरिटीज हुई, इंस्ट्रूमेंटलिटीज हुई, वो आपके फंडामेंटल राइट अब्रिज कर दें तो चलेगा। टू स्टॉप एनी अथॉरिटी विद इन इंडिया टू डू दैट, the definition of law has been made very broad and the definition of state also has been made very broad. तो अगर आप इस चीज पे देखें तो what is law? Law also include not only the legislation passed by the parliament or state legislature, but law also includes bylaws. It includes ordinances, it includes customs, it includes rules, regulations, orders, provisions made by any organ of the state. तो जब मैंने शुरू में बोला था कि आर्टिकल 12 एंड आर्टिकल 13 नीड्स टू बी रेड इन कॉन्सोनेंस, सो आई होप यू अंडरस्टैंड, बिकॉज ये लॉ तो हैं, इन सबको लॉ की डेफिनेशन में रखा गया है, वेदर इट बी रूल्स और रेगुलेशंस और कस्टम्स और ऑर्डिनेंसेस, बट इन सबको बनाने वाला कौन है? वो तो स्टेट है। तो सबसे पहले अपन को जानना जरूरी है कि स्टेट क्या है, फिर अपन को जानना जरूरी है कि लॉ क्या है। जब अपन ये दोनों चीजें पहचान जाएंगे तब अपन को ये बात समझ में आ जाएगी कि लॉ और स्टेट दोनों मिलके, दोनों एक साथ फंडामेंटल राइट को इन्फ्रिंज कर सकते हैं। और अगर वो ऐसा करते हैं तो कोर्ट के पास पावर है, सिंस इट इज द प्रोटेक्टर ऑफ द फंडामेंटल राइट एंड द गार्जियन ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, टू डिक्लेयर एनी सच लॉ, bylaw, rules, regulation made by the state as null and void. So law includes bylaws, ordinances, customs, rules, regulations, etc. Then comes the fourth clause. Fourth clause, अब इसमें अगर आप एक चीज देखें तो दो इंपॉर्टेंट चीज होती है। Any order passed by the court, can that be considered as law? भाई सुप्रीम कोर्ट भी तो लॉ और वो पास कर रहे हैं ना, ऑर्डर और ऑर्डिनेंसेस पास कर रहे हैं। सो सिंस इट इज द इंटरप्रेटर ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, तो वो इंटरप्रेट तो करेगा, बट वो इंटरप्रेट क्या कर रहा है? इंटरप्रेट यही कर रहा है ना कि ये लॉज, ये रूल्स और ये जो रेगुलेशंस हैं, क्या ये फंडामेंटल राइट को इन्फ्रिंज कर रहे हैं या नहीं। तो जो कोर्ट के ऑर्डर्स और डायरेक्शंस होते हैं, दे आर नॉट कमिंग अंडर द डेफिनेशन ऑफ लॉ। ऑलवेज रिमेंबर दिस इज एन एक्सेप्शन. The orders and the rule and the directions given by court is not included in the definition of law. Is the judiciary considered under the definition of state? Is it state or not? So the answer is yes. Judiciary, executive and parliament, legislative, all are considered under the definition of state. State तो है ही ना, but ये वाला जो अपन ने देखा था स्लाइड, स्टेट तो है ना, एग्जीक्यूटिव तो तीनों गवर्न, वेदर इट बी जुडिशरी, वेदर इट बी एग्जीक्यूटिव और वेदर इट बी लेजिस्लेचर, ऑल विल बी कंसीडर्ड अंडर द डेफिनेशन ऑफ स्टेट। बट जब जिस समय जुडिशरी जस्टिस वाला काम कर रही होती है, व्हेन इट इज डिलीवरिंग जस्टिस, then it will not be considered as state. भाई कोर्ट के अंदर भी 50 काम होते हैं ना, सिर्फ जस्टिस का नहीं, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव काम होता है, उसके बाद आपके पेपर कंडक्ट करवाने का काम होता है, बहुत से काम होते हैं कोर्ट्स के अंदर। उन सब मैटर्स में इट इज स्टेट, बट व्हेन इट इज डिलीवरिंग जस्टिस, व्हेन द जजेस आर सिटिंग एंड इट इज डिलीवरिंग जस्टिस, वो जो पार्ट है कोर्ट का, दैट इज नॉट कंसिडर्ड एज स्टेट, बिकॉज वो स्टेट के अगेंस्ट ही तो जजमेंट दे रहे हैं। या स्टेट के फेवर में दे रहे हैं या अगेंस्ट में दे रहे हैं, कुछ भी काम कर रहे हैं, बट स्टेट इज वन ऑफ द पार्टी, सो यू कैन नॉट बी द पार्टी इन योर ओन केस, यू कैन नॉट बी द जज इन योर ओन केस. So you cannot be judge on your own case. Hence, the court has said that when the courts are delivering justice, they cannot be considered as state. Otherwise, they are also under the definition of state. Now let's come to another slide and see that the orders passed by the court and the directions given by the court is not included in the definition of law. But then comes another question, amendment by the constitution, amendment by the parliament. If parliament makes a law, and if it is infringing the fundamental right of the citizen, it will be declared null and void. But what if a government has made a law and it is not infringing, but later on government amends the same law and that amendment is infringing the fundamental right of the citizen, then can we consider amendment as law? Very important question. Can amendment be called as law? Can amendment be called as law? This question came up in front of the court first time in Shankari Prasad case, that was in 1951. In 1951 Shankari Prasad case, when this question came up that you are considering bylaws, ordinances, customs, rules and regulation as laws, they are also covered in the definition of law. So can we include the word amendment also in the definition of law? That simply means if government amends any law, if government amends any law, it has the power to amend law. Some of them are amended under Article 368, some of them are amended by simple majority, some takes the half of the consent of half of the states. So any of the amendment done by the government, and especially under Article 368, with the special majority one, where they can do the maximum damage or the maximum change. Can that amendment, if it infringes the fundamental right, be considered as law? Can that amendment be considered as law? So in the Shankari Prasad case in 1951, the court has given the order that amendments will not be considered as law. That means the parliament was given an overarching power over the fundamental rights. That means the parliament has the power to amend the constitution, also the fundamental rights, and dilute the fundamental rights. You can go on amending the part 3rd of the constitution and dilute. Now we should not see it very critically, because the politicians of that time in 50s and 60s, they were honorable people. They would not do any such thing. Many of them or most of them were involved in the drafting of the constitution also, because the Shankari Prasad case was the case of 1951. And the court have faith and belief on the legislature that they will not do anything which will infringe the fundamental right of the citizens. But that thing changed in 1967, because politics goes and kept on becoming more and more dirty. In 1967, Golaknath case came up. This was Shankari Prasad in 1951. Then in 1967, Golaknath. What happened in 1967 in the Golaknath case? The Supreme Court declared amendment as law. That means the power given to the parliament to dilute the fundamental right was again taken away by the court. It said that any amendment if you make, and if it is infringing the fundamental right, it is inconsistent with the fundamental right, or it is diluting the fundamental right, then it will be considered under the definition of law. And clause number 2 says that any law which infringes or is inconsistent with the fundamental right will be declared as null and void. That means your amendment can also be declared as null and void if it is inconsistent to the fundamental rights given to the citizens. So this was the stance of the Supreme Court in the Golaknath case. First was the Shankari Prasad, which says the amendment is not considered as law. But the Golaknath case, the Supreme Court with 6 to 5 majority says that amendment will also be considered under the definition of law. That means if you make any amendment to infringe the fundamental right, that amendment will be null and void. Then in 1971, Parliament came up with an amendment, which was the 24th Constitutional Amendment. What happened in 1967 in the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act? That it has added clause 4 to article number 13. Initially, there were only 3 clauses, one relating to the pre-constitutional era, one relating to the post-constitutional era, and a third one which defines the law. These two says that any law inconsistent with fundamental right will be declared null and void, and this one defined the law. But they added, the Parliament added in 1971 and in the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act this 4th clause, and this 4th clause says that anything written in article number 13, that means anything means all the 3 clauses above written in article number 13 will not apply to article 368. 368 article talks about amendment, and anything written here, any provisions, any clauses of article number 13 will not apply to article 368. That means article 13 will not apply to amendments. That means if the Parliament amends the fundamental rights, it dilutes the fundamental rights, or it makes any law which is inconsistent with the fundamental right, that will be not considered as law, and that will not be abridged, that will not be turned as null and void, even if it is abridging or infringing any of the fundamental right. So Parliament has given itself a clear chit to amend and dilute any of the fundamental rights. Parliament again regained the overarching powers. Then came 1973 and a very important case which is called as the Keshwanand Bharati case. In Keshwanand Bharati case, several provisions, several directions and orders were given by the Supreme Court, and the most important one, because this whole Keshwanand Bharati case revolved around article 368, and it has upholded the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act. Upholded, when I say that, simply means that it has not termed our Constitutional Amendment Act 1944 as inconsistent or as null and void. It has upheld the 24th Constitutional Amendment Act, saying the same thing what 24th Constitutional Amendment Act have said. And what does it say? It says that nothing in Article 13 must apply to Article 368. That means amendment is not to be considered under the definition of law. Keshwanand Bharati case has accepted the Parliament's amendment, this one, 24th Constitutional Amendment, but it has also added one important clause which says, and which is one of the basic clause which I think all the UPSC aspirants know about, and that clause is what? Clause of basic structure. Sahil Jat is saying hi sir, and he has said hi so many times. And is there any question, Sahil? You can ask anything in any whichever way. If I can help you, you can ask. So coming back to our topic, it has also added one important provision, an important clause which says that anything, Parliament has all the power to amend the constitution left, right and center. Parliament can amend the constitution as it wants to, but Parliament must not amend the constitution in such a way that it destroys the basic structure of the constitution. This cannot be done. This must not be done. The basic structure of the constitution has to be kept intact. Now, when you say the basic structure was not defined by court at that time, but in subsequent judgments, we came to know the important core constitutional values of the constitution are included in basic structure. The elections, the parliamentary democracy, fundamental rights, directive principles, even the preamble, the amending powers, everything which is the basic structure of the constitution will not be and must not be amended by the parliament. So this is an added layer of protection which court has provided to the fundamental rights. And in the Keshwananda Bharti case, although it came up with the basic structure clause, it has upheld it 24th Constitutional Amendment Act. So now, what is the status of clause number 4 of Article 13 today? It is simple. Parliament has all the power to amend the constitution in whichever way it likes, but it should not amend the constitution in such a way that it destroys the basic structure of the constitution. That simply means the unlimited and overarching power of parliament again has been cut down. That simply means fundamental rights, being the basic structure of the constitution, cannot be and should not be amended, and if done, it will be declared as null and void by the Supreme Court. So I hope you have understood fully Article 13 and Article 14, because from now on and here on we are going to go deeper in our Indian polity classes, and tomorrow we will come up with another important topic which will be important for your 2024 prelims and for your mains. And if you are a new student, these lectures will also help you in your subsequent attempts. Thank you very much once again for joining with me in this online lecture. Thanks a lot.